The unshakable general, James Maddis. The Marine general walked into a room full of Iraqi tribal leaders who wanted him dead. No bodyguards, no weapons visible, just him, sitting down among men who had been killing Americans for months. What happened next would end an insurgency that had defeated every military strategy America tried. This is the story of a warrior scholar who became a legend by understanding that winning wars requires more than bullets. Stay until the end to discover why the general who never lost a battle resigned in protest, and what that decision revealed about true leadership. James Norman Maddis was born on September 8, 1950, in Pullman, Washington. He entered a world of post-war American optimism, growing up in the Pacific Northwest where his father, John Maddis, worked in merchant marine services and his mother, Lucille, was a homemaker deeply involved in community activities. Young Jim, as his family called him, grew up in a middle-class household that emphasized education, service, and personal responsibility. The Maddis family wasn't military. Jim's father had served in World War II, but returned to civilian life afterward. But the values Jim learned at home would shape his entire career. The importance of reading and education, respect for others regardless of background, and the understanding that leadership meant serving those who depended on you. These weren't specifically military values, but they translated perfectly to military service. Jim Maddis was a voracious reader from childhood. While other boys played sports or watched television, Jim read constantly: history books, biographies, military memoirs, philosophy. He was fascinated by how leaders made decisions, how organizations functioned under stress, how conflicts were resolved or escalated. By his teenage years, Jim had read more military history than most professional officers would read in entire careers. Maddis attended Central Washington State College, now Central Washington University, graduating in 1971 with a degree in history. College was during the Vietnam War era, a time when many young Americans protested military service and questioned American foreign policy. But Maddis felt differently. He believed military service was honorable, that defending America and its allies was noble work. In 1969, while still in college, he joined the Marine Corps through a reserve program. The Marines were perfect for Jim Maddis. The Corps emphasized intellectual rigor alongside physical toughness, encouraged professional reading and education, and maintained traditions of honor and service that resonated with Maddis's personal values. He was commissioned as a second lieutenant in 1972 and began what would become a 44-year career in the Marine Corps. As a young officer, Maddis developed habits that would define his career. He read constantly: military history, leadership studies, philosophy, biography. He studied famous battles and campaigns, analyzing what worked and why. He learned languages: French, Spanish, Arabic, believing that understanding cultures was essential to military effectiveness. And he pushed himself and his Marines physically, maintaining the combat readiness that defined the Corps. Maddis's early career was spent in various infantry assignments. He commanded rifle platoons, weapons companies, and infantry battalions. He served in the Pacific, in Europe, and across the United States. He wasn't deployed to combat initially. The post-Vietnam military was smaller and deployments were less frequent. But Maddis used peacetime to prepare for war, training his units relentlessly and studying military history to understand what combat would require. In 1991, Maddis got his first taste of combat. As a lieutenant colonel commanding 1st Battalion 7th Marines, he deployed to Kuwait as part of Operation Desert Storm, the coalition effort to expel Iraqi forces that had invaded Kuwait. Maddis's battalion participated in the ground assault into Kuwait and Iraq, executing complex mechanized warfare operations that destroyed Iraqi forces rapidly. Desert Storm was brief. The ground war lasted only 100 hours, but it taught Maddis crucial lessons about modern warfare: the importance of air power and intelligence, the advantage of superior training and technology, and the critical need for speed and aggression in offensive operations. Maddis's battalion performed exceptionally, and he emerged from Desert Storm with enhanced reputation and combat experience. Through the 1990s, Maddis continued rising through the Marine Corps ranks. He commanded a Marine Expeditionary Unit, served in staff positions at Marine Corps headquarters, and attended advanced military education programs. He was promoted to colonel, then brigadier general. By 2001, Major General Maddis was commanding the 1st Marine Division, one of the Corps' premier combat formations. Then came September 11, 2001. Maddis watched the Twin Towers fall on television like millions of Americans. But unlike most Americans, Maddis knew he would be soon leading Marines in combat against whoever was responsible. Within weeks, planning began for military operations in Afghanistan. Maddis and his Marines would be among the first ground forces deployed. In November 2001, Maddis led Task Force 58, a force built around his Marines, into Afghanistan. They conducted combat operations in the remote southern regions, hunting Taliban and al-Qaeda forces. The fighting was brutal: mountainous terrain, freezing temperatures, an enemy that knew the landscape intimately. But Maddis's Marines adapted, using superior training and aggressive tactics to defeat Taliban forces wherever they found them. Maddis earned a reputation during Afghanistan operations for intellectual rigor combined with warrior ethos. He quoted Roman emperors and Marine Corps legends with equal facility. He expected his Marines to be both scholars and fighters, understanding why they fought as much as how. And he led from the front, sharing dangers with his Marines rather than commanding from safety. In 2003, Major General Maddis commanded the 1st Marine Division during the invasion of Iraq. His 20,000 Marines drove north from Kuwait, fighting through Iraqi defenses, and reached Baghdad in just 3 weeks. It was one of the most successful large-scale military operations in American history, a testament to Maddis's leadership and the skill of his Marines. But Maddis understood that conquering Iraq was just the beginning. The harder challenge would be stabilizing the country, building a functioning government, and preventing insurgency. He told his Marines to be no better friend, no worse enemy. Friendly and respectful to Iraqis who cooperated, but absolutely ruthless against those who fought. This approach recognized that winning hearts and minds was as important as winning firefights. After the initial invasion, Maddis rotated back to the United States and was promoted to lieutenant general. But Iraq was descending into chaos. Insurgencies erupted across the country. American forces trained for conventional warfare struggled to adapt to counter-insurgency operations. By 2004, entire cities had fallen under insurgent control. The war America thought it had won was actually just beginning. In 2004, Lieutenant General Maddis returned to Iraq, this time commanding 1st Marine Expeditionary Force and overseeing Marine operations across western Iraq. The situation was desperate. The city of Fallujah had become an insurgent stronghold, effectively a small Islamic emirate where no American forces could operate. The city had to be retaken, but urban combat operations would be brutal. Maddis planned the Second Battle of Fallujah, the largest urban battle American forces had fought since Vietnam. He assembled overwhelming force, thousands of Marines and Army soldiers supported by armor, artillery, and air power. But before ordering the attack, Maddis gave civilians weeks to evacuate, dropping leaflets warning of the coming battle. He wanted to defeat insurgents, not kill civilians.
After Fallujah, Maddis focused on the broader counterinsurgency campaign in Anbar province, Iraq's western region that had become the heart of the Sunni insurgency. The conventional military approach, raiding suspected insurgent locations, killing or capturing fighters, wasn't working. Insurgents simply recruited new members to replace those killed or captured. Maddis needed a different approach. He began meeting with Iraqi tribal leaders, the traditional power brokers in Anbar's conservative society. These meetings were dangerous. Many tribal leaders supported the insurgency or were intimidated by it. But Maddis believed understanding Iraqi culture and concerns was essential to defeating the insurgency. He often met with Iraqi leaders with minimal security, sitting in their homes, drinking tea, listening to their grievances. Maddis's approach was revolutionary for American military commanders. He recognized that many Iraqis didn't support the insurgency ideologically. They supported it because they felt threatened by Iran, marginalized by Iraq's Shia-majority government, or needed protection and resources that insurgents provided. If America could address these concerns, Iraqi tribes might turn against the insurgency. This strategy culminated in the Anbar Awakening, where Sunni tribes turned against al-Qaeda in Iraq and allied with American forces. The tribes formed militias that fought alongside Marines, providing local knowledge and cultural understanding that Americans lacked. The insurgency in Anbar province, which had seemed undefeatable, collapsed within months. It was one of the most successful counterinsurgency operations in modern military history. Maddis was promoted to general in 2007 and given command of United States Central Command, CENTCOM, in 2010, overseeing all American military operations in the Middle East and Central Asia. It was one of the most important military positions in the world, responsible for wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, relationships with allied nations, and deterring threats from Iran and other adversaries. As CENTCOM commander, Maddis advocated for strong American engagement in the Middle East while being skeptical of Iran's regional ambitions. He believed Iran was the primary destabilizing force in the region, and that American policy should focus on containing Iranian influence. This put him at odds with some in the Obama administration who sought diplomatic engagement with Iran. Maddis retired from the Marine Corps in 2013 after 44 years of service. His retirement was somewhat controversial. Some reports suggested he was forced out due to policy disagreements with the Obama administration over Iran. Whether true or not, Maddis left active duty as one of the most respected military leaders of his generation, beloved by Marines who had served under him, and admired by strategic thinkers who studied his campaigns. In retirement, Maddis joined the Hoover Institution at Stanford University as a scholar, writing and speaking about military affairs and national security. He also served on corporate boards, including a controversial position at Theranos, the fraudulent blood testing company, one of the few missteps in an otherwise distinguished career. Then came the 2016 presidential election. Donald Trump, the Republican candidate, was looking for a Secretary of Defense. Multiple advisors recommended James Maddis, citing his combat experience, strategic thinking, and reputation for integrity. Trump met with Maddis and was impressed. After winning the election, Trump nominated Maddis for Secretary of Defense. Congress had to pass special legislation allowing Maddis to serve. Federal law requires retired military officers to be out of uniform for 7 years before serving as Secretary of Defense, ensuring civilian control of the military. But Maddis had only been retired 4 years. But Congress passed the waiver almost unanimously, reflecting bipartisan respect for Maddis's qualifications and character. As Secretary of Defense from January 2017 to December 2018, Maddis focused on rebuilding military readiness, strengthening alliances, and maintaining strategic focus. He emphasized that America's strength came not just from military power, but from alliances and partnerships, the international order that America had built after World War II. He worked to reassure NATO allies concerned about Trump's skepticism toward the alliance. Maddis also managed ongoing military operations in Iraq, Syria, and Afghanistan. Under his leadership, ISIS was defeated as a territorial entity, losing its capital Raqqa and its Iraqi stronghold Mosul. Maddis coordinated international coalitions, balanced competing interests among allies, and ensured American forces had the resources and support they needed. But tensions grew between Maddis and President Trump over fundamental strategic questions. Trump wanted to withdraw American forces from Syria immediately, believing the mission against ISIS was complete. Maddis argued that premature withdrawal would create a vacuum that Iran or Russia would fill, threatening American interests and allies. Trump also questioned the value of NATO and other alliances that Maddis considered essential to American security. In December 2018, Trump announced via Twitter that he was withdrawing American forces from Syria immediately. Maddis was blindsided. He hadn't been consulted, and he fundamentally disagreed with the decision. For Maddis, this represented not just a policy disagreement, but a fundamental breach of trust and a threat to American strategic interests. On December 20, 2018, Maddis submitted his resignation letter. The letter was remarkable for its direct criticism of presidential policy, rare for a cabinet official, almost unprecedented for a Secretary of Defense. Maddis wrote that Trump deserved a Secretary of Defense whose views were better aligned with his own, specifically on treating allies with respect and being clear-eyed about both malign actors and strategic competitors. The resignation letter made international news. Many saw it as a principled stand, a respected military leader resigning rather than implement policies he believed would harm America and its allies. But for Maddis, the resignation represented the culmination of a lifetime spent studying leadership and character. True leaders, Maddis believed, don't just follow orders. They provide honest counsel, even when that counsel is unwelcome. They serve institutions and principles, not individuals. And when they no longer can do so with integrity, they step aside rather than compromise their values. Maddis's resignation wasn't a rejection of civilian control of the military. It was affirmation that even under civilian control, military leaders have a duty to speak truth and act with integrity. That is James Maddis, a warrior scholar who proved that military excellence requires both physical courage and intellectual rigor. A general who understood that winning wars requires understanding cultures, not just destroying enemies. A leader who resigned rather than compromise his principles, showing that sometimes the hardest decision isn't whether to fight, but whether to walk away. His story reminds us that true leadership isn't about personal glory. It's about serving something larger than yourself, even when that service requires personal sacrifice.